Welcome back to Shadow Files, secrets they don't want revealed. Tonight, we descend into one of the most haunting mysteries to ever drift across the open sea, a story that begins in the cold Atlantic waters and spreads like a fog across centuries. The world knows the name Mary Celeste, a ghost ship found adrift in 1872, perfectly seaworthy, her cargo untouched, her crew vanished. But what most people don't realize is that the Mary Celeste was only the beginning, the spark that illuminated a hidden pattern repeating itself along the American coasts. For every Mary Celeste that captured headlines, there are countless others, ships that sailed proudly from New England harbors, from Louisiana bayous, from California ports, and were later found adrift, eerily intact, with food still on the tables, lifeboats missing, and the silence of something terribly wrong lingering on the decks. So what made the crew of the Mary Celeste, and others like her, abandon ship in the middle of calm seas? Why would experienced sailors flee safety, leaving behind lifeboats, navigation charts, and months of provisions? Tonight, we'll look not just at the Mary Celeste, but at her American kin, the ghost fleet that history tried to forget. The story of the Mary Celeste begins in late 1872. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and a crew of 7 set sail from New York aboard a sturdy brigantine loaded with 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol bound for Genoa, Italy. Briggs was an experienced captain, meticulous in every way, the sort of man who double-checked every rope and compass reading. The ship herself was sound. No one expected trouble. A month later, another vessel, the Dei Grazia, sighted a lonely silhouette drifting aimlessly about 400 miles east of the Azores. The Mary Celeste was moving erratically, her sails partly set. When the crew of the Dei Grazia boarded her, they found a scene frozen in time. The cargo was untouched. The ship's log ended abruptly 10 days earlier. The crew's belongings were undisturbed. The galley was fully stocked with food and water, enough for 6 months. There was no sign of violence, no evidence of a storm. Only one lifeboat was missing. It looked as if the people aboard had simply walked off the edge of the world. Over the decades, explanations flooded in: mutiny, piracy, giant sea monsters, even alien abduction. The official theory was delirium from alcohol fumes, but that's a convenient answer, the kind history books like to settle on to close a case they can't explain. But here's the thing, the Mary Celeste was not unique. Across American waters, similar stories began to surface, cases that echo the same strange pattern. In 1921, the schooner Carol A. Deering was found grounded on the Diamond Shoals off the coast of North Carolina, a place sailors called the graveyard of the Atlantic. Her sails were set, her galley prepared for breakfast, and her logbook missing. Lifeboats and navigational instruments had vanished, along with all 10 men aboard. To this day, no trace of the crew has ever been found. When Coast Guard officers boarded her, they reported something unsettling. Plates were still laid out. Bread sat on the counter, half sliced, as if someone had stepped out for a moment and never returned. Everything looked too recent, too immediate, like time had been interrupted. Government investigators called it mutiny. Locals whispered something else, that the Deering had become the plaything of something ancient that roamed those waters, something that took men's minds before it took their bodies. The Diamond Shoals have long been feared by sailors.
Kompass Felder.
Lights are seen on the horizon where no ships should be. Fishermen tell stories of phantom vessels gliding silently past them, vanishing in fog that wasn't there a second ago. The Deering, the Mary Celeste, 2 pieces of a larger puzzle. Move forward 30 years, and we find another echo, the Joyita. She was an American merchant vessel, built in Los Angeles, found adrift near Fiji in 1955. Though technically not in U.S. waters, she was an American ship through and through. Her cargo was intact, her engines dead, her crew gone. Once again, provisions for weeks remained untouched. The ship's clock had stopped at 10:25, as if reality itself had taken a pause. When investigators boarded her, they noticed something odd: bloodstains on the deck, an open doctor's bag, and missing lifeboats. There was no sign of a struggle, no bullet holes, no indication of panic. Just the quiet aftermath of something inexplicable. Every ghost ship has its rhythm, a kind of silence that speaks louder than screams. It's the silence of decision, of a crew choosing, for reasons beyond comprehension, to abandon safety for oblivion. In America's maritime history, there's another lesser-known case, the Aurang Medan. Though technically of uncertain registry, Many believe she was part of a U.S. intelligence operation in the late 1940s. The story goes that a distress call crackled over the radio. All officers, including the captain, are dead, lying in chart room and bridge. Possibly whole crew dead.
Moments later, ED.
When rescue ships found the Medan adrift, her crew was indeed dead, every man frozen in place, mouths open in silent terror, eyes staring toward the sky.
No Injuris, no Poison, no Barnes.
When the rescuers tried to tow the ship, she suddenly exploded and sank, taking her secrets with her. Officially, the case was never recorded. Unofficially, it's whispered about in the archives of maritime intelligence. So what connects these stories? The Mary Celeste, the Deering, the Joyita, the Medan. Different centuries, different oceans, but the same eerie pattern. Ships found perfectly intact, yet emptied of life. It's tempting to see these as isolated events. But what if they're not? What if the ocean itself keeps records, not on paper, but in patterns, repeating the same scene over and over like a warning? Some historians suggest natural explanations: rogue waves, carbon monoxide leaks, waterspouts. But sailors who've seen the open see no better. There's a different language out there, one written in fog, in compass needles that spin without reason, in footsteps echoing across empty decks. Imagine this: you're aboard the Mary Celeste. The night is calm, stars reflected on the black water. You're off duty, maybe writing a letter home. Then a faint vibration passes through the hull, not from wind, not from tide, but from something else. The captain goes topside. There's nothing there. The sea is glass. And yet, you feel watched. In the logbook, the last entry reads, at 8 a.m., observed strange cloud on horizon. Low and dense. That's it. The final words ever written aboard the Mary Celeste.
A strange cloud.
The same kind of cloud that sailors off Cape Hatteras claim to see before their radios go dead. The same dense mist described by modern fishermen before their instruments malfunction. A pattern that links the 19th century to the 21st. Even now, ships in American waters report ghost radar returns, signals of nearby vessels that don't exist. Some vanish mid-scan. Others seem to follow. The Navy calls them false echoes. Old sailors have another name: the Second Fleet. The U.S. Coast Guard archives include dozens of unsolved drift reports, vessels found unmanned, with no distress calls, sometimes just days after leaving port. Many are omitted from public databases. Others are quietly written off as operator error. But maybe it's not error. Maybe it's something recurring, a force that draws people away from their ships, lures them over the side like sirens of old, and leaves behind only stillness. As you listen to this, think about what it would feel like to stand alone on an empty deck, miles from shore, hearing only the creak of wood and the endless breath of the sea. What could compel you to leave? Fear? Hallucination? Or the overwhelming sense that something is calling from below? The ocean doesn't give up her dead easily. And perhaps, she doesn't take them all at once. There's a place off the coast of California where the fog rolls in too fast, where compasses turn lazy, and radar flickers with phantom echoes. The fishermen who work those waters call it the Quiet Belt. They say that once every few years, a vessel is found drifting there, empty, silent, engines off, decks clean, as if waiting for someone to return. In 1942, during the height of World War II, one such vessel appeared in San Pedro Bay. It wasn't a ship at all, it was a blimp. The U.S. Navy's L-8, part of the Ghost Blimp Squadron, took off from Treasure Island with two experienced pilots, Lieutenant Ernest Cody and Ensign Charles Adams. The mission was simple: a short patrol to check for Japanese submarines along the coast. The blimp was seen flying low over the ocean, dropping flares. Then it drifted inland toward Daly City, floating silently until it collided with a hill. When rescuers arrived, they expected the worst, but instead, they found the cabin intact, engines running, radios functional, and both pilots gone. Their parachutes were still on board. Their life vests were untouched.
The door was open.
Just like the Mary Celeste, the L-8 had been perfectly operational. There was no sign of a struggle. The blimp had even flown itself back toward land, as if guided by invisible hands. The newspapers called it the Ghost Blimp of San Francisco. The Navy's report concluded, cause of disappearance unknown. You begin to notice the pattern. The vessels are always in working order.
The provision untouched. The exit open. The people gone.
Almost a century later, in 2007, another American mystery echoed the same tune, this time in the Pacific, off the coast of Australia, but with an American-made yacht named Cas 2. The Coast Guard found it adrift near the Great Barrier Reef. The table was set for dinner. A laptop was open, still running. The sails were neatly trimmed.
The engine was humming softly.
3 men had been aboard, experienced sailors. Their life jackets were still on the seats. The logbook ended abruptly with an entry describing smooth sailing. The investigators concluded it was likely a freak accident. But the video recovered from the yacht's camera told another story. In the footage, the men are relaxed, laughing. The sea is calm. One of them steps toward the bow, looking into the water. Then, static. The recording ends.
No espace. No scream. No panique.
Just nothing. The same kind of nothing that the Mary Celeste left behind. And then there's the High Aim 6, found adrift near Australia in 2003, but owned and operated by Americans. The ship was discovered with its engine running, lights on, and supplies fully stocked. The only living things aboard were a few starving chickens. The captain and crew were gone, leaving behind their personal belongings, identification papers, even shoes neatly lined up against the wall. The ocean had taken them, cleanly, surgically, like removing a heartbeat from a body without leaving a wound. When you look at these cases together, separated by continents and centuries, it's impossible not to sense a pattern, a rhythm to the disappearances. But what rhythm? What's the melody that draws people into the waves? In 1963, the U.S. Navy lost a submarine, the USS Thresher. She sank during a test dive northeast of Cape Cod, killing 129 men. The Navy blamed mechanical failure, but some of the recovered sonar tapes are unsettling. Engineers who reviewed them privately said they heard an unnatural metallic resonance moments before the ship imploded. That sound, a low deep hum, was later picked up in other incidents, recorded by oceanographic sensors thousands of miles apart. The scientists called it the bloop. To the public, it was an unexplained underwater sound. But in internal memos, it's listed alongside several other signals with code names: Julia, whistle, slowdown. Each of those signals appeared shortly before mysterious maritime disappearances. Is it coincidence, or is it something the ocean itself is trying to say? Some researchers believe these vanishings follow magnetic anomalies, regions where the Earth's field twists unnaturally, disorienting navigation and perhaps even perception. There are 7 major ones across the world. One runs right through the Sargasso Sea, the same area where the Mary Celeste was found. Another cuts along the coast of North Carolina, the graveyard of the Atlantic, where the Carroll A. Deering was discovered. Maybe it's not madness or mutiny that drives sailors to abandon ship. Maybe it's the feeling. Imagine the air around you thickening, the hum of the hull deepening, your instruments starting to spin. You taste metal in your mouth. You feel watched. And then something, call it instinct, call it terror, tells you to get out. You don't think. You just move. You lower the lifeboat. You row. And when you look back, the ship is still there, calm, quiet, waiting. But you never make it home. In some of the declassified Coast Guard reports, sailors describe seeing shadows beneath the hull. Not fish. Not whales. Something slower, larger, shapeless, like the sea itself shifting under them. One 1958 report mentions an inverted reflection, as if a second version of the ship appeared beneath the waves, mirroring their every move. Moments later, their radio went dead. They called it a mirror sea.
Others speak of the whisper.
A sound that's not sound, more like a thought pressed against your skull. It doesn't come from outside.
It bloom inside your head.
Words without language.
A call without a voice.
And when it comes, you stop thinking about the ship. You stop caring about the safety of steel and wood. You just want to move toward it. There are log entries from 1893, written by American whalers off the coast of Maine, describing a low tone that made men walk into the sea like sleepwalkers. Centuries later, submariners report the same phenomenon: brief lapses in memory, moments where they hear something faint over the sonar, something they describe as a voice humming beneath the frequency of thought. No one can prove any of it. And yet, the pattern remains. Some skeptics point to methane hydrates, frozen gas pockets beneath the ocean floor that can erupt, destabilizing ships and creating localized fogs. A plausible theory. But it doesn't explain why, in every case, the vessels remain intact. It doesn't explain the bloodstains, the open logbooks, the stopped clocks. Others suggest a more psychological answer, that the isolation of the sea itself breaks people. That fear, exhaustion, and superstition combine to create mass hysteria. But mass hysteria doesn't leave half-eaten meals and still burning lamps. There's a story often told among American sailors, not in books, not in reports, but whispered in bars near harbors like Gloucester, Galveston, or New Orleans. It's the story of the caller. They say every few decades, a ship will hear something over the radio, a single wordless tone that cuts through all frequencies. It's faint, steady, and almost melodic. If you hear it, you can't unhear it. Within days, the ship begins to drift. Lights flicker. Tools vanish. People report seeing figures on deck that aren't there. Then, one by one, the crew disappears. The caller never speaks. It just hums. And when you follow the hum, you go where no map can guide you. That story sounds like legend, until you read the log of the SS Aurang Medan again. All officers, including the captain, are dead, lying in chartroom and bridge. Possibly whole crew dead. And then,
I die.
2 words that end the message. But the radio operator who received it later told investigators that before the final words, he heard a faint sound in the background. Not static, not Morse code.
Aton.
A hum. The same hum described by the men of the Deering. The same one recorded by the Thresher's sonar before she vanished beneath the waves. Coincidence? Or connection? The ocean is the last untamed wilderness. We map its surface, but beneath lies something older than language, older than life itself. In the 1970s, a classified U.S. Navy research program called Deep Echo tried to study sound anomalies in the Atlantic. The goal was simple: identify unexplained signals that interfered with sonar. What they found instead was unsettling. At certain depths, particularly near the mid-Atlantic ridge, not far from where the Mary Celeste drifted, sonar pings would come back, changed. The sound would return modulated, as if something below had answered. That data was buried for decades. Some of it surfaced during the Freedom of Information Act releases in the 1990s, but most of it remains classified. The fragments that did leak out include one peculiar file labeled Project S12. The transcription reads: unidentified frequency, consistent response pattern, appears sentient, possible biological origin, recommend cessation of tests. They stopped the program 2 weeks later. But maybe that's what these disappearances are, not curses, not coincidences, but responses. The ocean answering in the only way it knows how. And maybe, just maybe, the Mary Celeste and her American counterparts weren't victims of misfortune. Maybe they were the chosen to carry back a message. When rescuers found the Mary Celeste, they noted something odd in the ship's hold. 9 of the alcohol barrels were empty. They'd been made of a different wood, porous, unlike the others. The theory says vapors leaked out, spooking the crew into thinking the ship might explode. But that doesn't explain why the lifeboat was never found. Or why the ship's deck bore faint, circular burn marks, the kind sailors used to call witch lights. It doesn't explain the same burn marks found on the Deering. Or on the Joyita. Or even near the wreck of the Thresher, captured by underwater cameras, glowing rings etched into the silt. Rational minds dismiss them as coincidence. Superstitious ones see patterns. And somewhere between the two lies the truth, that the sea holds its secrets close, whispering them only to those willing to listen. Because maybe the sailors didn't abandon their ships at all. Maybe they were invited. And maybe the invitation still drifts on the tides, waiting for the next crew to accept. Every year, in American coastal waters, at least a dozen unmanned vessels are found, from tiny fishing boats to large trawlers. Most are explained away: mechanical failure, storms, human error. But the Coast Guard knows, the numbers don't add up. Too many of them are found under the same eerie conditions: calm weather, no distress call, full supplies, open logs. Too many end exactly the same way. You start to wonder, if all these stories from the Mary Celeste to the High Aim 6 were part of one long thread, one invisible line stitched through time, what does it spell? And what happens when that line leads back to shore? Because sometimes, ghost ships aren't found in the middle of the ocean. Sometimes, they drift into harbors, engines silent, lights glowing faintly, like they've come home. And when locals board them, they say the same thing every time. It feels like someone's still here. They check the cabins. Empty. The bridge. Empty. And yet, objects are moved between visits. Radios turn on at night. Logs update themselves. The ocean doesn't end where the land begins. It follows you. It seeps into your dreams. And maybe one day you'll be driving along the coast, see a shape on the horizon, a vessel where no vessel should be, and feel a pull in your chest, faint and familiar. That's when you'll remember this story. And that's when you'll know, the sea is calling again. There's an old superstition among sailors: never speak the sea's name at night. They say that when you do, the water listens. The waves pause, as if remembering you. The sea doesn't forget names. It stores them, layer by layer, like sediment. Every lost ship, every vanished crew, every last breath before the plunge, it's all still down there, echoing in the dark. The Mary Celeste. The Carol A. Deering. The Joyita. The High Aim 6. The Kaz 2. Each name a whisper. Each whisper, a ripple. And somewhere beneath those ripples, something listens back. In the late 1980s, a classified NOAA experiment known internally as the Abyssal Voice Project attempted to record deep-sea sound patterns in the North Atlantic. The scientists were after whales. What they found instead was a series of tonal fluctuations, a pattern resembling human speech rhythms, but inverted, slowed down, and layered across multiple frequencies. One of the analysts, Dr. Alice Hearn, noted in her field report that the sound resembles a conversation happening underwater, only without words. When the recording was sped up 16 times, the tone formed a single repeating cadence, 3 pulses, then silence, then one long drawn-out note. That same pattern appeared again, decades later, in a recording from an unmanned submersible near the wreck of the Mary Celeste's sister ship, the Amazon. The sound traveled through the hull before the subsystems failed. 3 pulses. Silence. One long note.
Like a heartbeat learning to speak.
Afterward, the recording was pulled from public access. A short memo replaced it, stamped confidential, potential psychological hazard. Psychological hazard. Because that's what the ocean is, isn't it? A mirror too vast for the human mind. You stare long enough into it, and eventually it stares back. The American coastlines are lined with memorials, plaques and statues honoring those lost at sea. Yet, if you trace the pattern of disappearances across history, you begin to see a subtle geometry. They form spirals, arcs, perfect circles drawn by time and tide. From New England to the Gulf, from Alaska to the Keys, there's a symmetry to loss, as if someone or something were drawing with a steady hand. Maybe that's coincidence. Maybe that's design. We've been told that the ocean is empty. That below a certain depth, there's only darkness. But the truth is, we've explored less than 10% of it. And that remaining 90%, the unseen, the unlit, the unmeasured, is where stories like the Mary Celeste begin and end. I once read a letter from a sailor who served aboard a merchant ship in 1967. He described finding a lifeboat drifting hundreds of miles from shore. Inside were 3 sets of clothing, a lantern, and a journal wrapped in oilskin. The last entry read simply, "The sea is not water. It's memory." He never found out who wrote it. The Coast Guard logged it as unverified. But what if that's the key? What if every ghost ship, every vanished crew, is part of that memory, the sea's attempt to remember itself through us? Look again at the evidence. The same conditions, the same calm weather, the same untouched supplies. Ships that seem almost staged, like exhibits in some museum of human disappearance. What if the ocean doesn't destroy these vessels because they're part of the message? Each one left behind as a marker, a breadcrumb, leading us toward a truth we're not ready to face. We assume disappearance means death. But maybe it means translation. A conversion from one state of being to another. What if the sailors of the Mary Celeste didn't die at all? What if they crossed over, stepping through the veil between the known and the unknowable? There are unconfirmed testimonies from the early 1900s, collected by the Maritime Historical Society in Boston. Fishermen claimed they sometimes saw figures on the fog, shadows walking across low mist, moving with purpose. They described hearing voices, not cries for help, but something like laughter carried by the wind. One man swore he saw a brigantine, an old-fashioned ship with white sails, glide silently across the horizon, glowing faintly under the moon. He said it vanished the moment he tried to signal it. When shown old paintings, he pointed at the Mary Celeste without hesitation. If the story is true, then perhaps not all ghost ships are empty. Perhaps some still carry their crews, only we can't see them anymore. The native peoples of the Pacific Northwest tell of Note Cyclone's Sea Road, a path beneath the waves where the spirits of the lost walk endlessly toward the horizon. Sailors vanish when they hear the song of the sea road, drawn toward its melody. Sound familiar? That same hum. That same call. In 2003, a NOAA hydrophone recorded a deep rhythmic tone in the Gulf of Mexico. At first, it was thought to be seismic activity. But after further analysis, it showed modulation, like an intentional signal. The frequency matched the range of human speech, though no voice was detected.
The sound lasted 6 hours.
And then it stopped. Later that same night, a shrimp trawler named Caroline's Grace was found drifting, crew gone, engines still running. The Coast Guard called it a freak mechanical failure. The report was buried. But the timeline matched exactly. The tone. Then the silence. Then another ghost ship. You start to wonder whether all of this, every vanishing, every unanswered question, might not be random. Whether it's the ocean testing us, studying us, reaching for something inside us. Because when humans look into the deep, we don't just see danger. We see ourselves, reflected, refracted, reimagined. The ocean is the perfect mirror because it shows what we refuse to face, our own smallness, our fragility, our hunger for the unknown. Maybe that's why we can't resist it. Maybe that's why we keep going back. Think about the crew of the Mary Celeste. Captain Briggs was a devout man, disciplined, rational. But even he wrote in his log about unsettling calm and strange shadows moving across the horizon. What did he see in that final dawn before his family and crew vanished? Did he glimpse the sea road? Did he hear the hum beneath the waves? Whatever it was, it made a seasoned captain abandon ship, take his wife and child into an open lifeboat, and sail toward nothingness. But what if he wasn't running away? What if he was answering a call? Every culture has its version of the same myth, the siren song, the call of the deep, the whispering tide. In every telling, it begins as a sound, then a feeling, then a surrender.
You don't fight it.
You don't want to. That's the part that haunts me most. Not the vanishings themselves, but the choice. Because maybe the people who disappear don't feel fear in that final moment. Maybe they feel peace. Maybe the ocean doesn't take them violently. Maybe it invites them home. Think of how all these ghost ships are found. Clean decks, tidy cabins, engines stopped as if shut down respectfully.
No chaos. No panique.
Juste absence, sereine, délibérate absence.
When the Coast Guard boarded the Joyita, they found one last clue. The ship's radio had been tuned to the distress frequency, but the wiring was faulty. Whoever sent the call tried to reach out, but maybe they weren't calling for help. Maybe they were answering. There's something profoundly human about that idea, that across all our technology, all our science, the oldest instinct still wins. The instinct to listen to what lies beyond comprehension. The ocean isn't just a body of water. It's a boundary between worlds. And every so often, that boundary thins. Maybe that's what the Mary Celeste represents. Not tragedy, but transition. A reminder that mystery is still real. That some doors, once opened, can't be closed. And that, in the grand silence of the sea, our voices are never truly gone. They're just absorbed. When I started researching this story, I thought it was about ships. But it's not. It's about us. About how, in every century, we build vessels to keep us safe, and yet, some part of us always yearns to leave them behind. Maybe that's why the ocean fascinates us and terrifies us in equal measure. Because it's the one place that refuses to give us answers. And maybe that's why, even now, ghost ships still appear, not as warnings but as invitations. Invitations to remember that the world is larger than reason, and that somewhere out there, between the waves, the Mary Celeste is still sailing. Her decks empty, her sails full, her crew unseen, carrying the echo of a truth we're not ready to hear. The ocean doesn't forget. It only waits. And perhaps when the tide is right, it will speak again. Until then, all we can do is listen. And hope that when it calls, we have the strength to stay aboard. If this story made you feel that quiet chill, the kind that lingers long after the video ends, then you know what to do. Like this video if you believe some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. Share it with someone who loves the unexplained. And tell us in the comments. What do you think happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste, and the others who vanished into the deep? Because one thing's for sure.
The shadow of the sea never stop watching.
Until next time, this is Shadow Files, secrets they don't want revealed. Stay curious. Stay wary. And never ever, speak the ocean's name at night.